Nick Saban had some stuff to say about NIL. That might not be great breaking news to you. Nick Saban, quite frankly, has been saying the same stuff a lot of you have been saying. Now, you may not be a Bama fan, so you may secretly hate on Saban for saying stuff that you actually agree with. But here's the thing. Ever since that little Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban incident where he was supposed to be off the record, but it ended up on the record about 10 or 11 months ago, he hasn't spoken publicly about it a whole lot, but Nick Saban doesn't have to call a press conference to get messaging out. He could do something like, for example, head to Montgomery at the Alabama Football Coaches Association convention, where he's speaking in front of a bunch of football coaches who are listening to every word he says, and he could express sentiments that he wants out there in the public sphere. And he did just that. He did just that. Jesse, I just realized you didn't hand me the printout, so I'm just going to, off the top of my head, paraphrase what Nick Saban said. He talked about two instances with NIL recently at Alabama, and he did not need to name the names because it was very clear who he was talking about. Cormani McClain's one of them, and Javion Cohen's the other one. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. Javion Cohen was a player at Alabama. He was an offensive lineman, and Nick Saban said, hey, there's a player who wanted $500,000 from us, and he wanted us to get his girlfriend into law school, and I showed him the door. And then there was a father or someone, I think he said someone close to one of the top corners in the country in this recruiting cycle who wanted $800,000 for him to come here. I said, you need to go find somewhere else to play. And that was what Nick Saban said. He was basically responding in a Q&A format to what NIL has been like to deal with. And for those of you who had not heard that, I want you to take a second, as we often do on the show, and I want you to let it simmer. Okay? I don't want you to fly off the handle. Gather in your own mind how you feel about that. Saban essentially saying a high school player's representatives hit him up for money, and he said, nope, too much, go elsewhere. And one of his own players tried to hold him up against the wall and not only get money out of him, but also he didn't use the word extort, but I will. Extort the university for a spot for his girlfriend in the law school. How do you feel about that? Not that it happened. I'm asking you how you feel about Saban's comments. Because I got, quite frankly, a reaction I did not expect from most of you. Most of you were surprised to shocked that he said it. Some of you were shocked that it happened. And several more of you were shocked that Nick Saban wouldn't go for it. The first batch of people, I just want to say welcome to NIL. And it's not always going to be this way. I assure you, we are headed for better waters. We are headed for smoother waters. It's just going to take a little while. I'll explain it to you in a second. But as for the other group, the group essentially, and you know them as well as I do, you may be one of them. I'm not talking down to you. I just want to ask you some questions tonight. That group would sound something like this. Saban's been doing this for years. Why does this bother him? Shouldn't he welcome it? The kids tell him exactly what it takes. That's how Bama got where they are. Now, you know that crowd. Some of you participate in that actively. And so if you watch this show, you've heard me speak about this. In fact, I did a segment, Jesse, Colin, I'd say it was about 2 months ago, where I told you some of the big boy programs, some of the premier brands in this sport are not doing at all what you think they're doing in both recruiting and NIL. It's totally inverted to the way that some people believe it's operating. Some people believe, for example, the Georgias or Alabamas or Clemsons of the world, they must be paying inordinate amounts of money because that's the only way that they would acquire a lot of that talent. And I told you at the time, the opposite is actually true. I didn't tell you they weren't participating in NIL. It would be dumb not to participate. I told you some of the biggest players in the room, the Alabamas and Georgias of the world, because I have firsthand knowledge of this, aren't offering top dollar. In fact, they're offering 30, 40, 50% less in NIL money. Now, I'm talking about collectives because we got to keep the segment on the up and up, of course. I'm talking about collectives. I'm talking about the understood amount of money you will make if you go play at University A versus B versus C. It's less at many of those programs. Some of you just flat out didn't believe me, and to that, I can't really do anything else. I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. But the other crowd was surprised when I said that. And I said, watch and see. You don't have to take my word for it. You will find this out down the road because it's still new. NIL was still new. So at the time, we didn't have a bunch of case study that we could do on this. Well, we're starting to get a little bit more of it. You know, we had, for instance, Caden Proctor, big 5-star tackle out of Iowa. flips from Iowa, upsets the masses up there in the Hawkeye State, and he commits to Alabama. And sure enough, it resonated on all four corners of the internet and everywhere in between. Alabama outbid Iowa. So much so that the kid came out and said, I took less guaranteed money to go to Alabama. What are you people talking about? And I shrugged at the time and I said, do you have information that counters what the kid himself is saying? What's the motivation there? But some people still wanted to believe what they wanted to believe. So anyway, I know there's a good reason why people don't believe what I'm saying. And the reason is because some folks, absent firsthand knowledge of how the inner workings of collegiate athletics run, they have allowed message boards or just their own speculation to drive whatever theories they happen to hold. And a lot of it's just you don't want to admit that those programs are that good. So it's a whole lot easier, when they're beating you to death 9 times out of 10, and when they're out recruiting you, it's just easier to think, well, there's something not on the up and up. They're cutting third base. They're not touching all 4 bags. They're cutting corners on us, and they're bending the rules and whatever. Because as sure as I say this, someone's going to be in the comments before the show's even over saying, you're saying those programs have never bent the rules before? It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying those programs are not gaining an inordinate advantage on you because they are doing something illegal. That's what I'm saying. And I know a lot of people push back on that. They just never push back with tangible evidence. I'm suggesting, in other words, that there are places that have a proven track record of development where they don't have to traffic in this. And I'm suggesting there are some other places out there that have been woeful for a long time that may very well have to go above and beyond with the dollar figure that they're throwing out there. So anyway, that set all this stuff up this past week. Saban makes these comments, and everyone flies off the handle. And I listened to it, and I said, I'm surprised he hasn't done this already. But on a more fundamental level, it's not what he didn't say. Like a lot of people said, coming out of that, I looked at a bunch of comment section, and they're saying, look at Saban, holier than thou, acting like they're not paying out NIL money. No, he's not. I've actually listened to him talk about how much NIL money their players have made. He's not saying anything like that. I've never said anything like that. It's not just Saban. Saban happens to be the focal point of this particular topic. You could talk about Kirby over at Georgia. You could talk about Ryan Day at Ohio State. I've gone through the list of names. It hasn't changed much. I'm flat out telling you again tonight, those programs are not paying nearly top dollar. They're not even like top 5, top 10. That's not what the numbers and the market dictate right now. That the numbers, the raw data suggests something other than the prevailing narrative out there. You can decide for yourselves why the narrative doesn't match reality. I'm just telling you the way it is right now. But on a more fundamental level, did anyone really think Nick Saban was about to get shaken down by anyone on his roster? Now, you got the Bryce Youngs of the world who really don't have to do this because they're making 7 figures in true NIL money. There's a big difference between roster value and brand value, which is what I keep going back to. Anytime we talk about NIL on this show, I keep going back to how I think we're headed towards smoother waters. It's terrible right now because there's a lot of inadequacy. There's a lot of figurative fumbling of the bag by some universities and some collectives. We've talked about Jaden Rashada and the mess at Florida and Miami getting tied up in that. I just don't believe those stories are going to be dotting the landscape 5 years from now like they do right now. I don't think you're going to be hearing so much about players hitting Nick Saban up saying, I need $500,000 and a spot in the law school for my girlfriend or I'm out. I don't think that's the prevailing story 5 years from now. It is right now because it's new. It's just new, guys. 5 years from now, I've told you before, but if you're new to the program, I'll tell you once more. If you're a more traditionalist type of fan like me, I think you'll be happy with the direction the sport in NIL is about to head because it's going to benefit people like us, and it's going to benefit the players, and it's going to benefit the programs. Everybody's going to be happier. And a new industry is going to rise as a result of it, by the way. So be on the right side of that. But here's what it's going to look like. NIL is not just NIL. NIL is 2 compartments. One of them is roster value. That's basically how much I'm worth as a linebacker at Pate State to that team and their effort to win a football game. But the other side is brand value, which is different than roster value. Brand value is I'm a linebacker at Pate State. Pate State's a premier program. You see me on Saturdays and Subway wants to ink a deal with me. That's NIL. Brand value. Down the road, the powers that be at all levels of this sport and what the enterprise of NIL will be are not going to allow this to be some backroom, shady, discombobulated collective mess. It's just not going to be that way for long. This is not going to be a roster value game for very long. It's going to be a brand value game, but that doesn't mean that you won't have value simply for being a football player at a major university. I just think the brand value game is going to pull into its orbit things like collective group licensing. For example, if I play for the University of Texas, I may be a 5-star wide receiver, and I'm worth a lot to Texas. But that Texas Longhorn logo on the side of my head and that Texas across my chest is worth a whole lot more to me. And right now, that's not the way this is talked about, but it's reality. It may make some people uncomfortable. I'm not saying players have no value. I'm just saying the intellectual property they're putting on their head and their chest has infinitely more value. It was there before they got here. It'll be there long afterwards. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't profit for contributing to that branding. Quite the opposite. What I'm saying is, to make things nice and neat, how about this? How about I'm telling you one day, not too far down the road, it'll kind of be understood what the value, what the going rate, what the brand value is for being a receiver at the University of Texas, for being a left tackle at the University of Tennessee. And how that is constructed is through group licensing. Right now, it's kind of a mess, but in the future, people will get their act together. The major brands of the world, especially funneling through entities like Learfield IMG, that will have its act together in the next 3 to 5 years. And all the power players, basically all the brands you see during commercial breaks on the CBS Game of the Week and the ABC and Fox Games of the Week, they will eventually, in the best of ways, be in bed with those universities. And through group licensing, it'll be understood, I'm getting this much every year. And I know before I go to Oklahoma how much I'm getting, simply because I'm an Oklahoma football player. We're about to watch the NFL draft not too far from now. And it's not a big mystery what the number 16 overall pick in the draft is going to make. We know because we can see it on a scale. Right now, that's not how NIL works, because the way NIL is operating right now is a bastardization of roster value posing as brand value. That won't be the case for long, because the money will be eventually big enough in the brand value game to where you don't have to waste your time hitting up your fan base $10 at a time to contribute to your collective. There will always be that roster value side of it. There will always be the ability as a fan base to go above and beyond. And if your program's desperate for a quarterback, go get that quarterback by any means necessary. I would contend the quarterback market will always be different anyway. But what Nick Saban just said out loud is what a lot of coaches have been saying, and what more and more of them are going to continue to say. I'm not doing this. I'm not giving a non-quarterback, unproven high school kid $800,000. You're insane. If somebody will, they'll say exactly what Saban said. You ought to go play for them. And likewise, for players already on your roster. Again, unless it is a proven stalwart or a quarterback or a high-profile perimeter skill player or left tackle, basically the same positions that carry max value at the next level on Sundays, unless it's one of them, you're not going back to the bargaining table over and over again. There's kind of this fantasy world that people kept posing, saying, I think every player is going to go into the portal every summer. I think they're gonna renegotiate their value with every program. You may do it for a little while. You may. I'm just saying I think the NIL world is going to evolve to where there's no point in doing it, because you're not hurting for money anymore. That's where I think we're headed. Right now, the Nick Sabans of the world and all the other coaches, they're living in a world where we're trying to get there. I think we'll eventually get there, and I think everyone will be better off for it. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.